Prototype racing, the tin-topped, closed-wheeled, headlight-bejeweled equivalent to Formula racing. Prototypes are essentially tangible proof that Lightning McQueen was not only arrogant, but wrong, as sometimes the track isn't always, in fact, lit. These cars, however, are designed to go racing in just those conditions. As of late, the once incredibly simple hierarchy of prototype racing has become a little more confusing. As a follow-up to my video on GTs, here's your ultimate guide to prototype racing. Prototypes came into the motorsport sphere as we know it in 1953 with the introduction of the World Sportscar Championship. However, the cars that were used in the very first race at Sebring were very different to the prototypes that we know today. They were still closed-wheeled, purpose-built racing machines, with cars such as the original Aston Martin DB3, the Cunningham C4R, and the Ferrari 166mm taking to the grid. As time went on, these purpose-built racing cars became sleeker, faster, and more advanced. By the mid-1960s and early 70s, manufacturers like Ford, Ferrari, and Porsche were pumping out some of the world's most iconic racing cars, including the GT40, the 365 P2, and the 917. The 1980s were characterized by utterly insane cars of the Group C category, with cars such as the Porsche 956, Jaguar XJR9, Mazda 787B, and Sauber C9 racing their way into the history books. However, as I explained in my collab with Endurance, which will be in the description, it all came crashing down as the costs of Group C skyrocketed during the early 1990s, killing the World Sportscar Championship. The prototype classes that eventually rose from the ashes were LMP1 and LMP2. LMP1 served as the top prototype class used throughout the world. They were technologically advanced, especially towards the end of the category's lifespan. The Toyota TS050, for instance, featured a 2.4-litre twin-turbo hybrid V6 that generated a combined maximum power output of 985 horsepower. However, the problem with highly advanced, high-speed racing classes are the extremely high costs that come with them. It was what killed Group C, and it's what killed LMP1 as well. So that's left us with the current state of play, which I will now explain. Of course, plenty of other prototype classes have existed over the years, but just to simplify things, I'll only be going over the major ones that are currently used in competition as of 2022. Let's start with LMH and LMDh. After LMP1 was binned, the WEC began working on a new class, Hypercar, otherwise known as LMH. At the same time, IMSA were also working on their evolution of the DPI class, which at the time was going to be called DPI 2.0. It was then decided that the WEC and IMSA would create a universal top prototype class, in a similar fashion to what had been done with GTE and GTLM. DPI 2.0 was then renamed to LMDh. Essentially, both LMDh and LMH cars will be used as the top class in both championships, racing against each other. I've made 2 videos on Hypercar and LMDh already, which discuss the specifics of both classes more in depth, which you can check out in the description below, but here's a quick recap on each of the classes. Hypercar, or LMH, serves as the replacement for LMP1. They are, however, slower than their predecessors, but they are a lot cheaper than their counterparts of yesteryear. The new GR010 is 152 kilograms heavier than its predecessor, the TS050. Furthermore, the regulations are designed so that there is essentially a set maximum in almost every single specification, including things like downforce. That equates to a lap time that's over 8 seconds slower around Le Mans. However, that gap is usually only 2 seconds for shorter tracks. As I said before, I made a video that talks more in depth about the specific premise of LMH, which you can check out once you've finished watching this video. What you need to know for this video is that Hypercar replaced LMP1, and that was mainly centered on manufacturer relevance and cost saving. LMDh, on the other hand, is essentially IMSA's answer to Hypercar, but will be running in the same class as its European sibling. Again, just as with Hypercar, I've made another video detailing the specifics of LMDh, but essentially it's the replacement to DPI, and these cars will also have a hybrid system. Those are your top two prototype classes as they stand, and they will lead the field in both IMSA and the WEC.
Next up is LMP2.
LMP2 is used in the WEC, the IMSA Weathertech Sportscar Championship, the European Le Mans Series, and the Asian Le Mans Series. LMP2 cars are used by privateer race teams with no real connection to a car, engine, or chassis manufacturer. There are some exceptions to this, such as Signatech Alpine. However, unlike LMP1, these teams are not responsible for building the car. In fact, Signatech Alpine actually just rebranded one of the pre-existing chassis as an Alpine for use in LMP2. LMP2 cars are made by one of 4 chassis manufacturers, being Orica, Ligier, Dallara, and the joint Riley Multimatic venture. As of the current regulations, which have been used since 2017, all LMP2 cars are powered by a 4.2-litre Gibson V8, which produces approximately 600 horsepower depending on the restrictions imposed by the organisers. The selling price of the chassis themselves must not exceed €483,000. However, while there are 4 manufacturers to choose from, LMP2 has essentially become a one-make series for the most part. The Orica 07 was so well developed that the other chassis was simply rendered uncompetitive. In qualifying for the 2021 24 Hours of Le Mans, the fastest LMP2 car was 4 seconds slower than the fastest Hypercar, and was approximately 2 to 3 seconds slower at shorter tracks. In the WEC, the ELMS, and the ALS, LMP2 is split between the regular LMP2 class and the LMP2 Pro-Am class, which actually makes a lot of sense considering it is a class designed for privateer teams. In short, LMP2 cars are the second fastest variety of prototypes featured in top flight competition.
Now we're moving on to the next class down, LMP3.
LMP3 is essentially a baby version of LMP2. LMP3 is designed as a more affordable entry into the prototype racing game, with a sale price cap, in a similar fashion to LMP2, of €206,000, allowing teams, team members, and drivers to develop before moving up to the higher categories. This class is used in quite a few championships across the globe, and is quickly becoming quite a popular class, seeing competition in the European Le Mans Series, the European Le Mans Cup, the Asian Le Mans Series, the IMSA Weathertech Sportscar Championship, and Prototype Challenge. LMP3 cars are smaller and slower versions of LMP2 cars. LMP2 cars are 4,750mm in length, compared with LMP3 machinery at 4,650mm. Width-wise, LMP2 cars are 1,900mm wide, compared with LMP3 cars between 1,800mm and 1,900mm in width. The engines used are also different too. LMP3 cars use a V8 like their bigger brothers, but instead it's a Nissan VK56 5.6-litre naturally aspirated unit that generates 460 horsepower. LMP3 cars also feature aerodynamic differences compared with LMP2, as they have less downforce. Like LMP2, there are also a select few chassis manufacturers to choose from, including Ginetta, Ligier, and Duquesne. The resulting changes mean that LMP3 cars are substantially slower than LMP2 cars, and often find themselves running at around the pace of top-level GT cars. However, the speed differential varies wildly from track to track. At Le Castellet in the 2021 European Le Mans Series, the fastest LMP3 car qualified about 10 seconds slower than the top LMP2 car. However, at Le Mans, when the LMP3 cars qualified for the Road to Le Mans race, their qualifying times are around 20 seconds slower than the leading P2 cars that qualified for the 24-hour race.
In any case, LMDh, LMH, LMP2, and LMP3 are all of the prototype classes that are used and will be used in top flight competition around the world. If you look at pretty much any of the top flight multi-class sports car racing series around the world nowadays, you'll find either LMP2 or LMP3 cars on the grid. And of course, you'll know LMDh and LMH as the world's absolute top flight sports cars. From here on out, it starts to get a bit niche, and the lines that differentiate the pace of the following classes get a bit blurred. Try not to worry about it too much though. This portion of the video is just to shed a little light on some of the other prototype racing classes that exist outside of the established ladder. Anyway, to the dedicated motorsport fans, Now you know we're taking a really deep dive into this sort of thing.
Ligier, who actually make both LMP2 and LMP3 cars, decided to build their very own one step down from LMP3 and called it the Ligier JS P4. Now, while there is technically no LMP4 class, this is about as close as you'll get, so essentially it's a class of its own. Yes, I know this is confusing, it confused me too, just try and bear with me. The JS P4 has a 3.7 litre V6 that generates approximately 400 horsepower in a package that weighs just 920 kilos. It's a downforce car, as all prototypes essentially are. However, it has less downforce than an LMP3 car, and is also cheaper still, with the purchase price sitting at €165,000. The JS P4 mainly sees competition in the Ligier European series, which features two classes. One of the classes is the JS2R class, which is entirely made up of GT-style cars that Ligier makes of the same name, and the other is made up entirely of the JS P4. The JS P4 will also be eligible to compete in the Prototype Cup Germany in the P4 class. Aside from this, there aren't too many other championships that this car is eligible for, and information on its competition history seems to be fairly scarce. It's also relatively new. You don't really have to worry about this one, but I thought I'd throw it in there anyway.
Okay, now this is where it starts to get really niche, because now we'll be talking about CN prototypes. Remember when we said the lines that separate the paces of the different classes start to get blurred around here? Well, while they don't look like much, as you'll see in a minute, at some race events, CN prototypes have actually been able to match the pace of modern LMP3 cars. Let's take a look, shall we?
CN prototypes are small racing cars that have engines between 1 and 3 litres and generally have either 4 or 6 cylinders. Before LMP3 rose to prominence, CN prototypes served as the bottom of the prototype ladder just behind LMP2, and actually saw competition in such categories as the Asian Le Mans series. However, CN prototypes have since been used in smaller national championships, such as the Australian Prototype Series, the Radical Club Enduro Cup, and the NASA Endurance Racing Series, not the space agency, and hill climb events. CN prototypes serve as a cost-effective way to get into prototype racing. Some of the more expensive cars can be purchased for as much as €170,000, but cheaper chassis can be bought for as little as €100,000, and second-hand cars are cheaper still. Some cars eligible for the CN category include the Radical SR8 RX, the Radical SR3, the Ligier JS 55, and the Wolf GB08 Tornado.
Now we have one more class to talk about, one that was thrust into the eyes of the motorsport community by a certain sim racer. Here to tell you all about it is my good friend Caitlin Penny Commentary.
Thanks for introducing me, Jack. Now let me introduce you guys to the Praga R1. A car that blurs the line between prototypes and sports cars, and which looks like a blur most of the time due to its ridiculous power-to-weight ratio. This car is fast, reliable, and popular, so it may surprise you to find out that the Praga company, based in the Czech Republic or Czechia, actually started out building trucks, buses, planes, bikes, and even army tanks. Basically everything other than ferocious-looking racing cars. Praga's first attempt at a racing car came in 2011 with the R4S, which looked a lot like a GT car and made its racing debut in the Dutch Supercar Challenge, like so many other bizarre star cars. It didn't last long though, because in 2012 the R1 came along and instantly became the company's figurehead. The Dutch Supercar Challenge liked it too, so much so in fact that they actually formed an entirely new class, the Supercar Challenge Superlights class, specifically for Pragas, Radicals and CN cars, which debuted in the 2013 season. Fun fact, apparently at the R1's first race, there was a strike in some division or other which meant that the wheels didn't turn up, so although 10 Pragas entered the event, they actually only had enough wheels for 3 cars to start. Whoops. Anyway, the Praga R1T came out in 2018, and it's basically just the R1 but with a turbo and a shark fin, giving it a second or two's advantage per lap, as if this commercially available beast needed to be any scarier. The best thing about Praga's 2018 though is that they kicked it off with the first officially run Praga R1 sim race, commentated by yours truly. I've been lucky enough to see Praga's racing in real life 4 times now. In 2019 at Motorsports Days Live in Silverstone, there were some test sessions going on, including my friend Charlie Martin getting her first taste of the car she would later race. In 2020 at Brands Hatch, where the R1T had success in Britcar, winning both races with Jem Hepworth and Danny Harrison. In early 2021 at Brands again, where I watched the qualifying for the Brit car races, but sadly the races were called off due to a fatal accident. And in late 2021, where I watched the Brit Car Championship finale at Donington. 2021 was by far Praga's best year yet, as they formed a brand new class of their own in the Brit Car Endurance Championship, a popular British club racing series, and competed for overall honours at every race of the year. Their popularity skyrocketed as well due to a certain Mr. Jimmer McBroadbimmer, who I actually met at Brands Hatch, taking part in his rookie season of car racing and making his car Goldie the most famous Praga racing car of all time. Back to the car, let's talk about the stats for a bit. 390 brake horsepower? Check. Only 643 kilograms? Check. Nationality of the car's constructor? Check. If you want to see it in action, I'd recommend getting yourself to any of the remaining dates of the Sports Prototype Cup and bringing some headache relief. Thank you back, and now Jack to you. Wait, no.
And that's it! That is your ultimate guide to prototype racing. We could have stopped it with LMP3, but this is Triple Crown Racing, and we go well beyond that. Very much to Caitlin for joining us today. The link to her channel is in the description below. I hope you learned something today. What did you think of today's video? Do you have any opinions on prototype racing yourself? Comment below. I do actually read them all, so you may as well say something and I will most likely respond to you. You know the drills with the socials. You know the drills with like, commenting and subscribing. It helps the channel grow, and we want the channel to grow. But anyway, until next time, goodbye.